Hello, everyone, and welcome to this episode of I'm Not a Robot, where we talk with real humans powering businesses with AI. Today, with me, I have the Chief Product Officer and co-founder of Canucci, Kai Andersson. Hello, Kai. How are you?
Hey, I'm good. Thank you. Happy to be here.
I'm so happy that you joined as well. It's nice to have you here. Where are you joining from?
I'm joining from Algeciras in Portugal.
Nice. Are you on holiday?
Now we're working remote from here. Sweden is lovely some months per year, but not in November. Sun has decided to avoid Sweden in November.
Okay, that sounds like a great way to work from. Amazing. Great place to work from. So, okay, to get started, can you tell us and our listeners a bit about your role as co-founder and chief product officer at Canucci?
Yeah, I met my co-founder Oscar when I was working at Peltorian a few years ago, which was a deep learning platform company. And also we kept in touch when I was part of setting up the National AI Center, AI Sweden. And we met in a joint belief that AI and data must be able to play a bigger role in accelerating the pace of change for companies or for organizations in general. And it's partly owned by the Swedish industrial family Wallenberg through its foundations. And I think we met around the shared view from different sides. Oscar having worked with the Wallenberg family for a long time and all their companies, and me from the agency side, that the world is changing at an ever faster pace, that organizations have a hard time of keeping up, kind of stuck in doing things in a 20th century way. So we need to use data to really unlock that. And I think that's what we're trying to do. And the old way of doing things and just publishing a new strategy with a vague strategy in a PowerPoint once a year doesn't work anymore.
Well said. Well said. So, can you tell me also a bit more about how AI fits in your company's mission?
We're strong believers in the saying that the people who do the job know how to improve the job. Us as humans, we have fantastic brains. Our brains are super plastic. They can change and adapt all the time. But the bitrate in which we communicate is really, really low. So when you and me communicate and you tell someone else and they tell someone else, we lose information because we have to simplify and dumb that information down. So in a large organization, or as soon as an organization kind of becomes more than 30 or 50 people, we were forced into using titles and simplified terms that we all adhere to, and all our perspectives and nuances get lost along the way. We're using AI to capture all the individual perspectives of the needs and realities of the future better, so they don't get lost in structures and bureaucracy. And we use large language models to really listen to everyone in organizations to help everyone listen to everyone better.
Okay, that's a very interesting point of view. Before going deeper into how AI really fits in and all that, I want to ask you also, why do you think it's very important that we need to be able to communicate better within a company?
Well, I think the Dalai Lama was right when he said that everything is solved through dialogue. And I think that's been the human approach throughout history. And I think just a few decades ago, change happened at a pace where there was time for information to kind of seep through organizations or groups of people. So we had time to understand and discuss and see our different perspectives. But when change is happening so fast that is today, I mean, something can happen and all of the world changes in a few hours. I mean, social media and internet. We don't have time anymore to really listen and ask follow-up questions. We form opinions and the world becomes polarized so quickly. So I think the same technology, data flowing and information flowing, we need to use the same technology to help us overcome the polarization that we see in the world. Otherwise, I think democracy and the free market run a risk of being left behind.
That's true. That's a very good problem to try to solve, I think. I don't know if that makes sense, but it's a problem that has always been there, but now the difference is that it's at scale. Because as you said, we don't have as much time as we did before. So because of not having the good communication within different organs in a company, it becomes very difficult to take decisions, to move these decisions forward. And there's just this huge misunderstanding from leaders to employees and between employees as well, which is making this whole process even more difficult. So, while tackling this problem, what are the targets for Canucci, for your company?
Yeah, I mean, mainly now I think we worked with some 10 organizations so far in these. It was roughly 2 years ago since we worked with our first organization, which was SKF, a large Swedish international company
Mhm.
with 40,000 employees. And we helped their CEO ask one single question to the entire company. And he communicated. I mean, in a dream world, I'd like to sit down with each and every one of you and have a cup of coffee and listen to you and listen to what you see that we need for the future. But obviously, time is restricted. So the next best thing is please write to me in whatever language you are comfortable with and tell me what do we need to become a better company, a better workplace, and a better company for our customers. And we had, I think, almost 15,000 employees from 69 countries writing 13 different languages. I think they wrote about 500 words on average. And we used a few different large language models to really just look at all the information and find what are the topics that occur and what topics occur together. What are the differences between the different countries? And whether we involve the different country directors to kind of share that information so they could have discussions and dialogues with their teams. Okay, you're saying this. What do we need to do to solve the problems and find new solutions? So everyone was really more involved and included in change for the future, which also, I think, creates a good foundation for distributing ownership of change and not just having that being owned by the CEO.
Yeah, I can imagine a positive response from the people when it comes to that, because it's not very common, as far as I see, that the CEO of the company wants to ask each individual what they think is important. And it also creates a bit of, actually in companies as well, I think it creates an IKEA effect, where when people contribute, they feel that they belong a lot more, which is a very important thing to consider as well from the leadership point of view. So, yeah, I find that very valuable. But I want to also understand a bit better, how does AI support this process?
Yeah, to be even more concrete, what we've done, and I also want to emphasize or say that we've worked mainly with private organizations, but we also worked with one municipality in Sweden where we asked citizens about the future. So I think it applies to any group of people. But what we do is, so far we've asked one single question rather than traditional surveys where you force people to be limited by an existing historical structure. If you were to build a competitor to our company, how would that look like? And we listen. And then we take all the information that come in, all the texts in different languages. We analyze them with different large language models. I mean, obviously, increasingly with GPT, but also we use Llama from Meta and Bard and XMLR, which is also OpenAI, I think. And out of that, we get different. I mean, we see topics or areas occur. Like this is a topic that people are talking about, and we use the models to summarize that to see what's in there, help us understand, and also summarize and withdraw the snippets from the answers. And everything is done anonymously. And what happens then is, usually we don't get like new insights, and we get a few new insights, maybe calibrations, but what we get is we get a co-created canvas that everyone that has responded can recognize they have actually contributed to, because the information has not been distorted into business buzzwords. it keeps kind of the same tonality in the language that people have said. So that's where the AI part comes in. And then in the second step, we have a physical conference or a meeting or a digital one. And we use that AI generated insight canvas to host workshops and dive deeper. Because in the first step, people are by nature quite generic, like they point towards a direction, but they don't become very tangible. So in the second step, we have workshops and we focus on the one or two areas that are biggest or most important that most people have talked about and say, okay, what are the obstacles for us in this area? Let's become more tangible. And we capture what they say there as well. And we use AI again to really summarize and group what people are talking about. So we get groups of obstacles. And then we have a second set of workshops where we identify, okay, what solutions do we need? Do we need to take a big decision or a policy change? So out of that, we get group of obstacles, group of solutions. And then that final step is to invite all the employees to commit to which obstacles and solutions do you want to work on changing? And in 6 to 12 months from now, what do you want to be measured on? Like, what do you want to go up on stage and say, this is what I achieved? And some things you can change in just changing your own daily behavior, but some things you have to collaborate in groups. And very often groups are formed then that are completely separated from the traditional structure. So someone in one department will work with someone in another department to really figure out how do we create a cross-organizational data infrastructure that we need, which used to be maybe in just one department.
That's very interesting. That's actually a phenomenon that I started seeing in some of our clients as well. There was a client that we worked with where in the beginning I was very confused about the structure, because usually in a company you have the leaders, heads of, CEO, and everyone taking care of their specific area, let's say. But that client of ours had a circle system, meaning they would choose one topic that needs to be pushed forward. And in that case, it was AI. And there was a leader of the circle who is doing the research, coming up with project ideas on AI, which is a role that is not attached to what he was doing within the company, but as an extra thing, as an extra topic that they want to move forward. Because I think it's very valuable to identify these as well by going through processes like you just mentioned. Because in that way, someone who wants to move AI forward is not necessarily from the IT department. Sometimes there's someone who's doing a completely different job, works in, I don't know, maybe sales, maybe marketing, maybe the HR, maybe another department, but is really passionate about AI or any other topic. That's why I find it very valuable that companies are trying to create this time and understand who are the key players within their organization that's going to be able to push this forward. So I feel like what you're doing is also contributing in this shape that companies should probably go through.
I think everyone who's worked in a larger organization know that there are managers and then there are leaders. And not necessarily every manager is a good leader. So I think it's important and good to really support every leader or manager, everyone in a leadership role with tools. Because it's quite easy to just tell people this is what you need to do. But you don't get full ownership from your teams if you just tell them. You need to involve them in really inventing what is it I want to do and what's the way I want to really take on this task on their own, to guide people rather than tell people.
Exactly. And to be able to create that environment also, as you mentioned in the beginning, listening to what people really care about, what they really want to do is crucial, I think. I want to go back to a comment that you made on going through this process. You mentioned that people can respond in different languages, and you emphasize a lot on it. So I'm wondering, why do you think that is very important while communicating their ideas?
Well, I think there's several perspectives where that is important. I think we've seen like in the AI ethics discussions, that there are a lot of bias in the models, and naturally, probably one of the most common languages for training data is English. So the models themselves tend to skew towards an English cultural way of responding and also interpreting language. But the same goes for us humans. If you operate in an international company where English is the corporate language, everyone who is from a non-English speaking country, their nuances get lost when they report or report back insights. They have to conform or adjust their cultural insights. I mean, just speak to a Chinese colleague and you will understand how different cultural thinking is. It really becomes often very forced to just translate that straight into English. I think it's increasingly important to have language models where we see that we have a good balance, really catering and capturing cultural nuances in the languages. So I hope that we will see in the coming 2-3 years more and more countries pushing out well-trained models in their own language or multilingual models, where we can see how well are we catering to the different languages. But I think states need to step in and really support the financial required, because very few companies in small countries have the resources to train a GPT-4 model. I mean, in a small country.
That's true. I think it's one of those, I guess it falls under the ethical considerations as well, but one of the most difficult problems to tackle is that I remember in the past, there was a point where nation AI models were discussed as a potential solution to that. But it's still, there's a huge cost on training these models. Not even in each country, there is the awareness yet to be able to start such a project as well. I don't know if it would even make sense, honestly. But there is a lot of research that is happening around this. And I remember seeing one from Entropic. It was, I think, end of July when I saw it. And there was a group of researchers who discussed that by default, large language models' responses tend to be more similar to the opinions of certain populations. And these populations would be fairly Western, such as the US or European countries and South American ones as well. So this really highlights the potential for biases that can cause harm within the decision making. So if we're going to be using these tools, we need to also bring the conversation around how is this going to affect us? Are we represented in this? Which countries, which populations are not represented? Because as you mentioned, this topic is bigger than just a company, but also on a country level. We are a globalized planet. We work in different cultures and different languages. So these are things that we need to always consider right now. So coming back to how this affects decision-making as well, can we say that your work at Canucci is also a way to in a way an attempt to cope with biases in decision-making? And if so, what kind of role do you think the models play in this?
Yeah, they are at the end of the day. I mean, our vision when we try to really distill it down is to help organizations take the right decisions for the future. And with right, we believe with more perspectives, to take into account more perspectives. So I think large language models and a data-driven approach in decision-making play a huge critical role for the future. But I think we're also at kind of a pivotal point where we need to decide, do we really want to open up the truth fully? Because I think at this point in time, we live in a democracy and we live in a free market where we have one foot in the world of transparency and inclusion, but there's also a little bit of, now let's keep on to that boys club. We don't want to really include everyone, but with data, you can really have full transparency and create policies that really show how biased are we. And that's also really a little bit of a scary move to make, because if you take that step, it's really hard to take it back. Go back. So I think they play a huge role, and I think they are in some sense the key to inclusion and diversity. But I'm not sure everyone wants to take that step, at least not while they're still in power. because it means giving up
Yeah.
the seat of power.
I think it's also not that easy to, let me try it this way. It's also not that easy to understand for many people that data does not mean reality. That's something that our founder, Jerry Camaro, said in one of our corporate trainings, which just stuck with me. Because when we're talking about these technologies, it's very likely that we talk about data. We say data is facts that we have, and we train models with it, we use it. But when you think of it, there's a big question, big work on how do you collect data? Which kind of data do you use for which kind of models? There's a lot of consideration that needs to happen. And the biases that we talk about also happen in that stage. So from the beginning, the change needs to happen.
Data is not the same thing as truth always. I mean, it's
Yeah.
a step further. It might be a step further closer to the truth. And I think, I mean, science has an up on this. We're meant to use data as a point in our discussion. And I think it's easier to approach data as a group and say, okay, what does this say? Let's discuss it. Than if one person has an opinion. Because then all of a sudden, automatically, a lot of people go like cross-armed and take the anti-stance.
That's true. It's important because I think what AI or like talking about data, talking about these models, I think it makes us humans realize how many things are there still that we can't figure out. I think it's just making us it forces us to think about these issues that are within the gray area, where I always say, when it comes to data, we talk about ones and zeros and everything can be broken down to that, right? But when we talk about humans, when we talk about intercultural collaboration, when we talk about these, there's a lot of gray area that's going on that's not very easy to define. So I think that's also where it's coming from a bit.
Yeah, and I think there's a tendency to go for like, let's do an AI analysis or analyze data so we get grounds for a decision. But I think we need to have more of the data is pointing us somewhere. Okay, now it's time for us humans to look closer. What's happening here? And that's more of a gut feeling. I think we might be wrong sometimes to expect the data to give us the answers. I think it's more these models will point us towards an area where we need to discuss and be humans, because it's not always the case that we can explain why this area is the right place to look, but it usually is.
That's
it's
true.
More, I think, my old CEO at Pentarian said it very well. It's like, it's more deep learning models and large language models are more similar to our gut feeling than our brains.
Interesting. Okay.
Because our brains
have a lot.
Yeah.
Go for it.
Because our brains are very low resolution. It's more like old code, if this then that. I mean, our brains obviously, but I'm talking about our frontal cortex where we analyze things.
No, that's very interesting. I want to kind of go back to the process that you were telling us about, which I think is a great attempt to deal with all these huge problems, but it's a step forward. Maybe it doesn't solve everything, but it's definitely a step forward in starting the conversation, in trying to democratize AI, democratize decision-making by using AI within companies, organizations, and any group of people, really. So once you start, after everyone speaks about what is needed for the future, and in their own language as well, you use AI models to analyze this and basically generate a co-created canvas which shapes the dialogue. Is that correct? That's what I got from the beginning? And basically generate a co-created canvas which shapes the dialogue. How does this lead to actual change?
Well, the actual change happens only when the leaders have the courage to say, okay, you said this, you pointed out this, here's the mandate to go change it. So that's, I mean, 100% human is required to make the change happen. But what the AI does is it helps include everyone. It helps objectify what is everyone saying is needed the most. Where's the biggest opportunity to have people really take ownership of the change themselves. But then the people with the titles that say we're the ones who decide need to say, okay, here's the mandate to go change this and not just continue the way we used to. And that requires courage and also a letting go of identity and the notion that I might not have the same title next year. That might change. I think a good example is the climate conference. I mean, we have COP28 coming up. I think if we were to use AI data and ask every participant or everyone in the world what is needed and just present that on a big display at that conference, I think we wouldn't need any more conferences. The answer is there. But almost everyone who participates at that conference kind of likes being at that conference. So the incentive of solving the problem isn't really that high.
Yeah. I think, maybe democratizing the technology is also democratizing decision making, maybe means not more politics, but less politics, as you pointed out. And you emphasize also a lot on how AI itself is not enough, but what we need is the collaboration between AI and humans. So as I really like how at that last stage you highlighted how what leadership needs to do there is 100% human. So I think that's a good point to also consider. Yeah. So I wanted to also ask you, how does this, you mentioned municipalities and states as well in the beginning. How do they fit in the picture?
Well, we talked a little bit about democracy. I think more than ever, we need to include people in the democratic process. And rather than just asking, the current recipe now is we ask people once every 4 years or 5 years, depending on what country you live in. Next year, half of the democratic world go to elections. And we ask them, what do you think in a preset number of categories? But we don't ask them, what do you want for the future? What's most important for your children to reach their full potential? If we were to ask that instead and have everyone just say, I want this, I need this, these are my dreams, this is what society should look like, then we could get a completely different answer that politicians could either argue around or collaborate around. And really, we could involve citizens on a more ongoing basis. We have in the north of Sweden, we have the company Northvolt, the battery factory set up. So there's been a lot of new labor moving to that part of Sweden from all over the world. And we asked everyone who'd moved there for the last 2 years, what would be required for you to want to stay here for generations? And just have them write in their own language to get that insight. Because obviously, when you have a lot of people moving into an area, there's a risk of polarization between the people who were born there and the new ones. And we don't want that. We want everyone to respect each other and understand each other more.
No, that's a very interesting use case. Well, I think I've heard so many conversations of different scenarios so far on how AI and politics can come together and cause manipulation, considering AI's role on topics such as disinformation, deepfakes, but I didn't hear that many conversations where AI can actually benefit in democratization. So thank you so much for bringing this point of view. I think that would be a great message to leave our listeners with as well. It was a pleasure to have you, Kai. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you very much. It's been fun talking about this.